The first thing people noticed wasn't her age. It was the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 16-year-old Lina Morales stood alone in front of the bench, drowned in an oversized hoodie. Her eyes fixed on a crack in the courtroom floor, like it was her last safe place on earth. To everyone else, this was just another routine morning in Providence Municipal Court. A teenage girl, a parking ticket, a $350 fine at a hospital lot. Nothing unusual, right? But Judge Frank Caprio had seen too many lives up close to be fooled by paperwork. The way Lina's shoulders curled inward, the way she flinched every time the door opened, this wasn't normal teenage nerves. This was fear. Old fear, deep fear, the kind a child carries when they've been keeping a secret for far too long. What no one in that room knew yet was simple. This ticket wasn't the problem. It was the evidence. Before we go further, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? And if stories of real justice matter to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Lina swallowed hard, the knot in her throat so tight it felt like she'd swallowed a stone. She pushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear, but her fingers trembled so much she missed. The courtroom lights made her look even smaller, like a shadow that could blow away with one wrong breath. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, the warmth in his voice deliberate and steady. Take your time, young lady. Start whenever you're ready. The kindness nearly broke her. No one had spoken to her gently in weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. My name is Lina Morales, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the second word. People shifted quietly in the gallery, parents, workers on their lunch break, students, retirees, but every movement felt enormous to Lina. She pulled her sleeves down over her hands, hiding the little crescent-shaped marks she'd pressed into her palms the night before, just trying to calm herself enough to sleep. I'm 16. She paused, breath stuttering in her chest. I got the ticket at St. Matthew's Hospital. I know I shouldn't have parked there. I know that spot wasn't mine. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, as though the memory itself physically hurt. But I didn't have a choice. Those words hung in the air, fragile as glass. Judge Caprio tilted his head, studying her with the same gentle seriousness he used with frightened children and exhausted parents. He could tell when someone was lying. He could also tell when someone was holding back the truth, because telling it out loud might shatter them. What brought you to the hospital that day? He asked softly. Lina's lips trembled. She looked down, staring at her sneakers' cheap canvas, torn at the toe, the kind that suggested money was tight long before she opened her mouth. It was my little brother, she said quietly. Nico. He's 11. Something flickered across her face, love. Fear, guilt, all swirling together in a way only someone who has raised a sibling could understand. She clenched her jaw and forced herself to keep going. He had an accident. A bad one. The gallery grew still. Was he sick? The judge asked. No. Her voice wavered. He got hurt. Her fingers knotted in her sleeves so tightly her knuckles turned white. Already people in the back row exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't sounding like a simple medical emergency. Judge Caprio noticed too. Can you tell me how he was injured? Lina hesitated, her shoulders tensed, like she expected someone to burst into the courtroom and drag her away for answering that question. Finally, she whispered, It was my father. A ripple passed through the room. Even the court stenographer stopped typing for half a second. Lina forced herself to breathe through the rising panic. He was drunk. Again. Nico tried to stop him from driving. He grabbed the keys, and my dad shoved him. Really hard. Nico hit the side of the kitchen table. Her voice cracked. He wasn't moving. A collective exhale spilled out from the gallery. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Lina nodded slowly, as if agreeing with their shock. I called an ambulance. My father. He ran out the back door. He always runs. Her throat tightened again, but she kept speaking, words tumbling out, soft but unstoppable. My grandmother, she's 73. She works mornings at a bakery and nights cleaning offices. She wasn't home. so I went with Nico in the ambulance. I stayed at the hospital. He needed stitches, and they were worried about a concussion. She paused long enough to wipe her nose on her sleeve. When visiting hours ended, I went home to get some things for him, clothes, his stuffed bear. A soft smile tried to form, but failed. But when I got back to our apartment, my dad was there. Judge Caprio didn't move, but something in his expression changed, a tightening at the corners of his eyes. He was drunk and angry, she said, voice small. He kept saying I ruined everything, that if I had kept quiet, none of this would have happened. He wanted Nico out of the hospital. He said hospitals ask questions. He said they'd blame him. For the first time, her chin lifted, revealing a stubborn spark under all that fear, a spark that had kept her little brother alive. I locked myself in the bathroom and called my grandma, but she didn't pick up. She was at her second job. Her breath hitched. So I ran. I took the bus back to the hospital. I figured if I was with Nico, he couldn't take him, but it was visiting hours again. The parking lots were full, every space. I drove around, and she swallowed as tears gathered in her eyes. And then I saw the handicapped space, right by the entrance. I used it. I knew it was wrong, but I thought, if I get back to him fast enough, maybe my dad won't follow me. Maybe he won't find us. Her voice went silent. Judge Caprio let the quiet settle for a moment before he spoke. Lina, where is your father now? She shook her head. I don't know. He disappears for weeks sometimes. But whenever he comes back, things get worse. A woman in the gallery pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes red. A man in the second row clenched his jaw, shaking his head in disbelief. Lina continued, almost whispering as if confessing a crime. I didn't tell the hospital the truth. I told them Nico fell. I just didn't want them to take him away. I'm not old enough to be his guardian. They could put him in foster care. They could separate us. She wiped tears off her cheeks with the back of her hand, frustrated at how many there were. I don't have anyone else. It's just me, him, and Grandma, and she's already exhausted. The judge leaned back slowly, inhaling in a way that suggested he was trying to steady himself before he said something he couldn't take back. Lina, what you've been carrying is far heavier than any young person should ever bear. His voice was thick not with anger, but with the kind of heartbreak only someone who has witnessed human suffering for decades could understand. I'm not done yet, Lina whispered, voice shaking. There's something else. The room held its breath. She lowered her eyes to the floor as though speaking the next sentence might summon her father's shadow into the room. The night before court, someone knocked on our door. Late. It was him, my dad. Her hands trembled again. He said if I said anything in court, anything at all, he'd make sure Grandma paid for it. He said I should keep my mouth shut about what happened or I'd regret it. She blinked, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I haven't slept since. A murmur of outrage rippled through the courtroom. Someone whispered, "That poor kid." Judge Caprio didn't interrupt. He let Lina speak until her voice finally broke, and she fell silent, empty, drained, trembling. When she looked up at him again, her eyes were swollen, but something fierce flickered behind them. I'm not here to make excuses. I just wanted to explain why I parked there. I was scared, and I still am. The judge folded his hands, staring at the young girl, who looked like she'd lived 3 lifetimes of pain already. His silence wasn't judgment. It was the weight of everything she'd endured settling into the room. Lina, he said gently, thank you for telling me the truth. But his tone carried something else, something deeper. This case had only just begun. For several long seconds, the courtroom said nothing. No one shifted. No one coughed. Even the hum of the ventilation seemed to soften, as if the building itself understood the gravity of what had just been spoken. Lina stood rigid, her shoulders trembling beneath the faded hoodie she wore like armor. She had finally said the things she feared saying most, and now she stood exposed like a bruise pressed into the open air. Judge Caprio cleared his throat softly. Lina, what you've shared today took tremendous courage. His voice was steady, measured, but those who knew him well could hear the slight tremor beneath it. He adjusted his glasses, a familiar gesture when he needed a moment to gather himself. "I need to ask you something important, and I want you to answer only if you feel safe doing so." Lina nodded, though her body flinched at the word safe, as if the concept felt foreign. "Has your father ever threatened you before, or hurt you directly?" Her breath caught. The judge noticed. So did the entire room. Finally, she nodded once. "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "Can you tell me how?" She hesitated, then lifted one hand to her jawline, just a quick touch, subtle, but revealing. There, under her sleeve, faint yellow and green bruises bloomed along her cheekbone. The gallery collectively inhaled, the sound like wind brushing across a field. "My father, he gets angry fast. He breaks things, yells. Sometimes he hits walls. Sometimes he hits—" Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish the sentence. "He wasn't always like this," she whispered. "When I was little, he worked construction. He used to make pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. He used to dance with Nico in the living room." Her face softened with the memory, just for a heartbeat. "But after my mom died, he changed. He drank more, worked less, lost jobs, started blaming us for everything, for being mouthy, for being ungrateful, for costing him money, time, everything." She squeezed her hands together so hard her nails dug into her palms. "I used to think if I behaved perfectly, he'd get better. If I cleaned the house right. If I took care of Nico. If I stayed quiet. But nothing worked." Her voice cracked. Nothing ever worked. A woman in the third row silently wiped tears from her cheeks. A man beside her shook his head, jaw clenched with the helpless anger of a parent imagining his own child in Lina's place. "And the night he hurt Nico," Lina continued, "he told me it was my fault for making him angry." She shivered, and though she tried to hide it, the room saw. "It's always my fault. Everything's always my fault." The tremor in her voice broke something in the room, a collective ache that seemed to settle deep in every chest. Judge Caprio leaned forward again, his eyes softening with a mixture of heartbreak and something else, resolve. "Lina," he said gently, "none of this is your fault. Not one part of it." Her lips pressed together, as if she wanted to believe him, but didn't know how. He added, "A child is never responsible for a parent's violence." A few people nodded. Others whispered yes under their breath. But Lina was trapped between memory and fear, still unable to look fully convinced. "I know what he said to you," the judge added quietly. "People who do harm often blame the ones they hurt. They do it to control. They do it to instill fear. They do it so you'll stay silent." Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock crossing her face because someone finally understood. "He told me not to tell anyone," Lina muttered. "And you believed you had no choice," the judge said. She nodded. He exhaled slowly. "You do have a choice. You have one right now." Her gaze lifted to him, hesitant, vulnerable. "Do you feel unsafe going home?" he asked. The pause that followed was long, painful, and telling. "Yes." The word fell like a stone into deep water, heavy and irreversible. Gasps rippled through the gallery again. "Does your grandmother know the extent of what's happening?" "No," Lina whispered. "If she knew, she'd try to protect us. And she's too old. My father could hurt her too." There it was, the unbearable weight she'd been carrying alone. Lina wasn't just afraid for herself or for Nico. She was afraid of losing the only guardian she had left. Judge Caprio placed both hands flat on the bench, steadying himself. "Lina, listen to me carefully. What you've done today, telling the truth, is the bravest thing you could have done. And you are no longer alone. Not for 1 second more." Her breath shook, hope flickering so faintly it looked like the glow of a dying candle. But she started, and he gently raised a hand. "No, that's over. Your father's threats end here." Her lips parted in shock. "Officer Rivera," the judge said firmly, turning toward the back of the room, where a uniformed court officer stood at attention. "Step forward, please." A tall, broad-shouldered man approached, expression stern but compassionate. "Yes, Your Honor. I need you to contact the Providence Police Domestic Safety Unit. Immediately." Lina froze. The officer nodded sharply. "Right away. And stay in this courtroom until I give further instruction." "Yes, Your Honor." When the officer stepped aside, the room buzzed with quiet murmurs. Lina stared at the judge, terrified that she'd done something wrong by telling the truth. "I don't want him to get arrested," she blurted suddenly. "If he goes to jail, he'll blame us more when he gets out." The judge softened his tone. "You're not responsible for the consequences of someone else's choices." "But what if Lina?" His voice was gentle but unyielding. "Your father put your brother in the ICU. He threatened you. He threatened your grandmother. If the law doesn't intervene now, the danger will not go away. It will escalate." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with both hands, trying to hold everything in fear, relief, confusion, shock. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "I just wanted to keep Nico safe." "You did," he said. "You're the reason he's alive." Her breath hitched. No one had ever framed her actions that way. "And now," he continued, "it's my job to keep you both safe." The gallery remained silent, but emotion rippled through the room like a current, people wiping tears discreetly, nodding along with the judge's words. "Is your father aware you're in court today?" the judge asked. Lina swallowed. "I don't know. Maybe. He sometimes watches things online. He knows the court streams cases." The judge nodded, absorbing the information. "Then it's even more important," he said, "that we act swiftly." Officer Rivera stepped closer again. "Your Honor, the Domestic Safety Unit is on standby for a call." "Thank you," the judge said. Then he turned to Lina. "Lina, I want you to understand something," he said softly. "You are safe in this courtroom. Nothing will happen to you here. No one can touch you, no one can threaten you." She nodded, though the trembling in her fingers showed how hard those words were to believe. "And when you leave today," he continued, "you will not walk out alone. You will leave with protection, with support, and with the full weight of the law behind you." Lina's eyes widened. "Protection?" "Yes," he said. "You and Nico and your grandmother will be placed under immediate safety protocols until your father is located and dealt with appropriately." Her breath quivered. "I didn't know something like that existed." "It does," he replied. "And it exists for people like you." She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. "I never wanted to get anyone involved. I just didn't know what else to do. And that," the judge said gently, "is exactly why we're here." For the first time since stepping into the courtroom, Lina's shoulders loosened, just a fraction, but it was enough. Enough to suggest that somewhere beneath all the fear, a fragile seed of trust had begun to grow. The judge glanced down at the file on his desk, her ticket, the reason she'd come here. But that slip of paper now seemed laughably insignificant compared to the truth that had unfolded. "Lina," he said finally, lifting the ticket, "this is nothing." He ripped it cleanly in half. The gallery erupted in whispers and soft applause. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the storm that was about to break. For a long moment, Lina stood frozen, eyes locked on the torn pieces of the ticket as they drifted like quiet confetti onto the judge's bench. It should have been a relief, the kind of relief that makes your knees weaken and your lungs finally expand. But instead, she looked almost frightened by it, as if the destruction of that paper somehow confirmed that her life had become something she no longer recognized. Judge Caprio let the room settle. The light applause faded into soft sniffles and an uncomfortable silence, the kind that hums with raw emotion. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who had just heard a truth he wished he never had to hear, but was grateful she'd found the courage to say. "Lina," he began gently, "you're safe here. No one, not your father, not anyone can harm you in this courtroom. And I give you my word, when you leave today, you will not return to danger. Her eyes widened, as if she wasn't sure she'd heard him correctly. No adult in her life had ever spoken with such certainty on her behalf. But before Lina could reply, the courtroom door creaked open. A small sound, barely more than a whisper of hinges, but it sent a visible shiver down her spine. She flinched so sharply that even people in the back row noticed. Officer Rivera turned immediately toward the door, hand resting on the strap of his radio. It was only a clerk returning from the hallway, but the reaction said more about Lina's trauma than any words could. Seeing her panic, Judge Caprio stood. He didn't do that often. When he rose from the bench, the entire room seemed to gravitate toward him, as if everyone instinctively knew something grave was about to happen. He walked slowly around the bench, joints stiff with age but movement steady with purpose, and approached the witness stand until he was within a few feet of the trembling girl. "Lina," he said softly, "look at me." She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. Her eyes were red and exhausted, eyes that had seen too much for 16 years. "You will not go home without protection. You will not face this alone. And what happened to your brother, what happened to you, this courtroom is not going to look away from it." The gallery fell silent again, listening to every syllable. "But," he added, "I need to understand everything to protect you properly. So I'm going to ask something difficult." He paused gently. "Is there more? Anything you haven't told me yet?" Lina's breath hitched. Her fingers twisted her sleeves until the fabric stretched. Her lips parted, and for a second she looked like she might deny it, might say no, might retreat behind the protective shell of silence she had built over years. But the dam had already cracked. "There is one more thing," she whispered. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. "That night, the night he hurt Nico, my father didn't just shove him." The room tensed. He was yelling about money, about how everything was ruined. I tried to get between them. I grabbed his arm so Nico could run behind me. And he, her voice broke into a sob she tried to swallow but couldn't. He grabbed me by the neck. Someone in the gallery gasped. A woman covered her mouth. A man muttered something under his breath that sounded like fury. Lina continued, voice trembling. He pushed me against the counter. I couldn't breathe for a second. He said if I ever called the police, he'd make sure none of us walked out alive. She lowered her head, as though ashamed of surviving. And then, when he realized how hurt Nico was, he blamed me. He always blames me. Her voice shrank to a whisper. He said I was the reason Mom died, that she worried herself sick because of me, that everything bad that ever happened was my fault. The words hung in the air like poison, and for the first time since she had entered the courtroom, Lina covered her face with both hands as if trying to hide from the memory. Judge Caprio's breathing grew heavier. His jaw tightened, not with anger at Lina, but with a restrained fury directed at the man who had damaged this child. He spoke again, voice lower. "Officer Rivera." "Yes, Your Honor. I want you to call the domestic safety unit again. Tell them this case is escalating. I want immediate child protection involvement and an emergency safety plan prepared within the hour." "Yes, Your Honor." Lina looked up sharply. Fear flashed across her face. "But what if he comes to the apartment? Grandma's there alone right now. She doesn't even lock the back door most afternoons because the frame sticks and she's too tired to fight with it." "If he goes there, he won't," the judge said firmly. "How do you know?" Her voice cracked, almost pleading. "Because I'm not going to allow it." She stared at him, as though trying to see if that was truly possible, if a judge could protect her from a man who had haunted her every step for years. He turned to Officer Rivera again. "Send a patrol car to her residence. They are to stay there until child protection arrives. No one enters except authorized personnel." "Yes, Your Honor." Another officer quickly left the courtroom to carry out the order. Lina's shoulders collapsed with a mixture of relief and exhaustion, so heavy it made her sway slightly on her feet. She clutched the wooden edge of the podium to steady herself. But the judge wasn't finished. "Lina," he said gently, "do you have any other family? An aunt, an uncle, Anyone who could take you and Nico in temporarily? She shook her head. No. Mom grew up in Puerto Rico. Most of her family stayed there. Grandma came here decades ago. It's just us. And your father's side. I don't know them. He cut them off a long time ago. He always said they owed him, and that they didn't deserve us. The way she said it, flat, defeated, revealed she'd grown up on his twisted logic. Judge Caprio exhaled. Then we'll find another way. He pulled a chair toward her slowly. Sit down, Lina. She blinked at him, unsure. It's all right, he reassured. You've been standing too long. She obeyed hesitantly, lowering herself onto the chair with the fragile posture of someone who rarely sits in front of adults unless being scolded. The judge crouched down to her level, not easy for a man his age, and rested one hand on the armrest of her chair. His eyes met hers, gently. Listen to me, he said. Your courage today, it's going to change the course of your life, and your brother's life, and your grandmother's. Tears clung to her lashes. But you need to know something else. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. You didn't cause his anger. You didn't cause his drinking. You didn't cause the violence. She shook her head slightly, unable to accept it. He spoke again, firmer this time. Children do not cause grown men to hurt them, and you are not responsible for fixing the damage he created. A soft sob escaped her. Do you understand, Lina? She nodded, though it was the fragile nod of someone trying to believe something they'd never heard before. I want you to breathe, he said quietly. Slow. With me. He inhaled gently, and she mirrored him. For the first time since she'd entered the courtroom, air seemed to reach the bottom of her lungs. When she exhaled, a tremor left her body as if a piece of fear had finally loosened. Then the judge stood and turned toward the gallery. This is not simply a case about a parking violation, he said, voice ringing with controlled fire. This is a case about a young girl forced to choose between breaking a rule and saving a life. The room went utterly silent. This is what happens, he continued, when a child is asked to carry burdens no child should ever carry. And today, in this courtroom, those burdens end. He then looked back at Lina. And now, young lady, I'm going to help you take back your life. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears weren't just fear. They were something else, something long dormant, hope. But the storm around her life was far from over, and the next steps would change everything. The courtroom felt different, now not like a place of rulings and fines, but like a sanctuary where truths long buried finally surfaced. People in the gallery were sitting forward in their seats, hands clasped, eyes fixed on Lina as if afraid that looking away might cause her to disappear or crumble. Even the court reporter, who had typed through thousands of hearings with mechanical precision, now blinked through damp lashes as she resumed her work. Judge Caprio remained standing near Lina, his presence a shield as much as a comfort. Time seemed to take on a strange silence around them, thick, heavy, protective. Lina, he said softly, I need you to stay with me a little longer. We're going to make a plan to keep you safe. But first, I need to understand everything, every detail that will help us help you. She nodded, her eyes still rimmed red. But something was different now. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at him, and that was enough. Good, he said gently. Let's start with Nico. How is he now? Lina's hands tightened together, and she swallowed. He's okay. Mostly. The hospital said the concussion isn't severe, but he's scared. Every time the door opens at night, he wakes up crying. And he doesn't want Grandma to leave the room. The tremble in her voice deepened. He won't even go near the kitchen table anymore. He thinks Dad is going to come back. And what about you? The judge asked. Her gaze dropped again. 2. Sleep on the floor outside his room, just so if Dad comes back, I can stop him. A few people in the gallery audibly gasped. You put yourself between Nico and your father? The judge asked quietly. She nodded. Always. And there it was, the raw truth behind this entire story. A truth that carved itself into the souls of everyone listening. This girl had been forced to become a shield before she even became a woman. "Lina," Judge Caprio said gently, "that is an impossible burden for someone your age." "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "Nico needs me." "Yes," the judge agreed, "but you need safety. You need stability. You need the chance to simply be a child, not a protector, not a buffer, not a casualty of someone else's rage." Her lip quivered again, but she held still. "I want to ask a difficult question," the judge continued. "When your father grabbed you by the neck, was that the first time?" Her answer came immediately. "No." The word fell like a weight. Heavy. Certain. Too certain. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. She thought for a moment, her brow furrowing in concentration as if trying to measure years of pain on a clock no one should ever have had to watch. "Since I was maybe 8, maybe younger. I don't really remember when it started. I just remember thinking it was normal, that this was just what dads did when they were upset." Her voice faltered. "And after Mom died, it got worse." A man in the back row lowered his head, shaking with quiet disbelief. A woman beside him wiped tears she didn't bother hiding. "And you never told anyone?" the judge asked softly. "I tried once," she whispered. "I told my guidance counselor in middle school that I was scared to go home. But when child services came to talk to me, I got scared. I said everything was fine. Why? Because Dad told me if I opened my mouth again, he'd make us sorry." She exhaled shakily, and I believed him. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Not in approval, never that, but in understanding, with the heavy empathy of someone who had seen this pattern too many times. "Lina," he said, "I want to be absolutely clear. What happened to you is abuse. What happened to Nico is abuse. None of this is your fault. Your silence didn't cause his violence. His violence caused your silence." Her eyes filled again. "But now," he said firmly, "we stop it." Before Lina could respond, a knock sounded on the courtroom door. This time she only tensed slightly, a small victory, before Officer Rivera stepped inside. He approached the judge and spoke quietly. "Your Honor, Domestic Safety Unit is en route. 2 officers are stationed at the grandmother's home. They're securing the property now." "Thank you," the judge replied. Rivera continued. "Additionally, Providence PD is issuing an alert for the father. He'll be detained the moment he's located." Lina's breath caught. "What if he runs?" she whispered. "Then we'll keep searching," Rivera said simply. "We don't stop until he's found." She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever used words like "we" and "protect" in reference to her before. Judge Caprio gestured for Rivera to remain close, then turned back to Lina. "Now," he said, "we plan next steps." He motioned for Patricia, his longtime clerk, who approached with a notepad. "I'm recommending immediate emergency placement under the Family Protection Program," the judge said. "They will provide temporary safe housing until a full evaluation is completed." Lina's eyes widened. "Housing? Like a shelter?" "No," the judge said. "Safer. A supervised residence for families escaping domestic violence. You, your brother, and your grandmother will stay together, and you'll be protected." "But what about Grandma's jobs and Nico's school?" "And all of that will be handled," Judge Caprio said. "Protection first, logistics after." Lina hesitated. "But won't it seem like I'm running away?" she whispered. "You're not running," he said. "You're surviving." He paused. "And there's a difference." The words washed over her, and for the first time she seemed to sit a little straighter, just a millimeter, but enough that some people noticed. "You will also receive counseling," he continued. "Someone trained to help you unpack years of trauma, slowly, safely, not alone, not in silence." Lina blinked hard. Counseling sounded like a luxury, something that belonged to kids with problems people cared about. She'd never imagined it could apply to her. "And as for Nico," the judge added, The hospital will be informed of the circumstances. A child life specialist will work with him directly. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. And your grandmother, he said, will receive financial support from the emergency fund until her situation stabilizes. Lina stared at him as though he had just told her gravity no longer applied. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, he replied softly. You've said enough today to last a lifetime. She wiped her face again, tears falling silently. Then something unexpected happened. A woman in the gallery, a middle-aged nurse still wearing her scrubs, stood. Your Honor, she asked timidly. The judge turned toward her. Yes, ma'am. The nurse held her purse with both hands, nervous. 2. Work at St. Matthew's. I heard about the boy who came in that night. I didn't know the family. But I'd like to donate something for them, for medicine or food, whatever they need. Her voice trembled with sincerity. The judge nodded. Thank you. That's very kind. But the nurse wasn't finished. She walked to the front of the room and set a folded bill, $20, in the clerk's desk. A man in a suit stood next, then an older woman, then a teenage boy wearing a hoodie. One by one, people from the rows began walking forward, placing Bill's small ones, large ones, into a growing stack on Patricia's desk. No one spoke. It was silent charity, the kind that doesn't demand attention, just action. Even Officer Rivera stepped forward quietly and placed a folded bill of his own. Lina stared in disbelief, hand pressed against her mouth. Tears slipped down her face again, but these were different. Softer, warmer. Something like relief. Something like being seen. When the last person returned to their seat, the judge looked at the pile. We do this, he said, because compassion is justice too. The room sank into reverent quiet. Then he turned back to Lina. You've carried the weight of fear for years, he said gently. From this moment on, let us carry some of it for you. Lina's breath shuddered. She wiped her cheeks with shaking fingers. I've never had help before, she whispered. You do now, the judge replied. And you will continue to. Then he added more quietly, we're going to change the trajectory of your life today. For the first time, truly, Lina believed him. But the hardest part was still ahead, and the danger wasn't done with her yet. The stack of donations on Patricia's desk continued to grow. Small bills, large bills, even a few envelopes that people had pulled from their bags and wrote on hastily. Lina watched it all as if in a dream. It didn't seem real, not the money, not the kindness, not the room full of strangers standing with her when she had spent years believing she was invisible. But trauma has a way of mistrusting miracles. As the last person returned to their seat, doubt flickered across her expression. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her hoodie and whispered, almost inaudibly, what if it's not enough? Judge Caprio turned to her. What do you mean, Lina? She inhaled shakily. What if he finds us before the police do? What if he goes to Grandma's job? What if Officer Rivera stepped forward again? He won't get near her, he said with quiet conviction. Providence PD is taking this seriously. Domestic threat cases move fast. We're already coordinating with units in surrounding towns. But Lina shook her head, voice small and raw. You don't understand. My father always finds a way. He knows people. He knows how to disappear when he wants to. And he knows how to show up when you least expect it. Her words sent a cold current through the room. Even the judge looked troubled. Tell me, he said gently. Has he ever stalked you? Shown up unannounced before? Lina nodded. All the time. He would disappear for weeks, and then suddenly show up at 2 a.m, banging on the door, screaming that he needed money, or that we were ungrateful. One time he broke a window to get in. Another time he tried to take Nico with him while Grandma was sleeping. Her voice trembled. He gets angry when he thinks someone else is taking the family side. If he finds out you called the police, he'll come for us. She wasn't exaggerating. People who survive abuse often speak with a clarity that comes from studying danger their entire lives. The judge didn't dismiss her fears. He didn't try to soften them. He understood that pretending everything was fine would be the greatest betrayal of all. Instead, he turned to Officer Rivera. Notify DSU that we need immediate relocation today, not tomorrow, today, and ensure her father's warrant is marked as a priority threat. Yes, Your Honor. Then the judge looked back at Lina. You are not going back to your apartment, he said simply. Not for clothes, not for schoolwork, not for anything. But no. His tone was firm, authoritative, but kind. You and your family will be escorted to a temporary safe residence immediately after this hearing. Your father will not know the location. Lina stared at him, stunned. A safe house, like the ones in movies? Not exactly, he said with a gentle smile, but it will be secure, and you will be surrounded by people trained to protect you. The idea seemed both terrifying and relieving to her. But what about Grandma? She whispered. She's still at work. The judge nodded. 2 officers are already en route to pick her up. She will not return to the apartment. Lina blinked several times fast, trying to comprehend an entire world shifting beneath her feet. And Nico? She asked. The hospital has been informed, Rivera answered. He will be discharged into protective custody. A pediatric trauma specialist will accompany him. Hearing that, Lina finally exhaled, a long, shaky breath she seemed to have been holding since she arrived in court. But the moment of fragile relief was interrupted when the courtroom door opened again, this time more forcefully. Everyone turned. A second officer rushed in, speaking quickly to Rivera. Rivera's expression tightened. He nodded, then approached the judge. Your Honor, he said quietly but urgently. The patrol officers at the grandmother's residence just reported movement behind the house. Lina's body stiffened instantly. The judge's face darkened. Movement? What kind? They're not sure. Could be an animal. Could be someone circling the property. Is the grandmother safe? They've secured her inside and locked down the perimeter. Backup is on the way. Lina's breathing went ragged. He's there, she whispered. I told you. I told you he'd come. Rivera knelt beside her, trying to reassure her. Lina, we don't know that yet, but officers are handling it. She shook her head violently. He knows the back fence. There's a broken slat. He used to slip through when he didn't want Grandma to know he was there. Rivera froze, absorbing that. I'm calling it in now, he said, already reaching for his radio. Unit 12, be advised, check the back fence on the north side. Broken slat possible entry point. Static crackled. Then, copy that. Moving now. Lina hugged her arms around herself, her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold on to her own sleeves. She wasn't imagining danger. She was forecasting it, like someone who'd lived in storms long enough to predict their path. The judge approached her again. Lina, look at me. She did. You're safe here. No one can reach you. But they can reach Grandma, she said, voice shaking. No, he said firmly. They can't. Not now. Not anymore. Before she could reply, Rivera's radio crackled again. Unit 12 to base. We've got movement near the backyard shed. Stand by. Then silence. The entire courtroom froze. Finally, the radio came alive. Negative on suspect. False alarm. Just a raccoon. A wave of relief spread, followed by nervous laughter from a few in the gallery, laughter born not of humor, but of tension finally breaking. But not for Lina. She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. Her hands stayed clenched. He's going to come back, she whispered. He always comes back. The judge nodded slowly. Which is why we will be ready. There was strength, not pity in his voice. A knock sounded on the door again. This time Rivera opened it himself. A man and woman in plain clothes entered, carrying folders and wearing identification badges. Domestic Safety Unit, the woman said. We're here for the Morales case. Lina shrank slightly at the word case, but the judge smiled warmly at the 2 officers. Thank you for coming quickly. The DSU woman stepped forward, kneeling to meet Lina's eyes. Hi, sweetheart, she said gently. My name is Agent Thompson, and this is Agent more or less no relation, I promise. She offered a tiny smile. "We're here to keep you and your family safe." Lina looked overwhelmed, unsure whether to trust them. But Agent Thompson continued softly. "We know what it's like to feel watched, to feel hunted. We've seen what you're describing, and we don't let people like your father get near the families we protect." Lina swallowed, voice raw. "You mean that?" "We do," Thompson said. "Every word." "And what about Nico?" she whispered. "We're sending a team to meet him at the hospital now," the agent replied. "He'll be moved to the safe residence the moment he's ready." Lina nodded slowly. She didn't relax, but she didn't look like she was drowning anymore. The judge stood once more, addressing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, this young woman has endured more than most adults could handle, but today marks the end of her silence and the beginning of her protection." He turned to Lina. "You did everything right, Lina. Today you saved your brother. You saved your grandmother. And whether you realize it or not, you saved yourself." Her chin quivered. Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. Not yet. "Now," he said gently, "let us take care of you." Agent Thompson extended her hand. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Lina stared at the hand for a long moment, hesitant, scared, uncertain. Then finally she reached out and took it. And for the first time in her life, someone else led her toward safety. For the first few steps, Lina walked, as if the floor might collapse underneath her. The agents flanked her on each side, Agent Thompson with calm, steady breaths, and Agent Morales scanning every corner of the courtroom, as if expecting danger to seep through the walls. But this wasn't the part that frightened Lina. She'd been watched her entire life. What frightened her now was something far more foreign: being protected. As they guided her toward a small conference room beside the courtroom, somewhere she could wait while arrangements were finalized, Lina kept glancing back at Judge Caprio, as if she wasn't convinced she was allowed to leave his presence. He gave her a soft nod, reassuring. "Go with them, Lina. I'll be right here when you come back out." She paused only a moment before continuing. Inside the conference room, the harsh fluorescent lights hummed above her. Agent Thompson closed the door gently, not the kind of slam Lina was used to hearing at home. She pulled out a chair. "Why don't you sit, sweetheart?" Lina obeyed, lowering into the chair slowly, hands clasped in her lap. Agent Morales stood by the door, arms crossed, posture protective. Thompson slid a small packet of tissues across the table. "It's okay to cry," she said softly. "I'm fine," Lina whispered. Her voice was the brittle kind of fine, the kind that means anything but. The agent didn't pressure her. Instead, she opened a folder. "All right," Thompson said in a low, gentle voice. "Here's what will happen. We're moving you, your brother, and your grandmother to a temporary secured residence. You'll have your own room. Your grandmother will have hers. Your brother will be monitored by pediatric specialists for trauma and healing." Lina blinked, stunned. "Our own rooms? All of us?" "Yes," the agent said. "But Grandma has to share a room with Nico at home." And sometimes she stopped herself. Old survival habits. You don't talk about the cracks in your life. People judge you for them. Thompson leaned closer. "Sweetheart, you're not being judged. You're being helped." Lina nodded slowly. "And, after a few days," Thompson continued, "we'll evaluate whether a longer-term arrangement is needed. You'll have therapists, caseworkers, financial support, and legal protection." Lina's lips parted in shock. "No one's ever offered that," she said, voice cracking on the word offered. The agent's expression softened with the kind of empathy that comes from knowing just how many children had said those same heartbreaking words. Thompson asked a series of questions, confirming Lina's school, schedules, grandmother's work hours, Nico's treatment timeline. The whole time, Agent Morales remained alert at the door, arms folded, jaw tight. The more details he heard, the more resolute his expression became. At one point, Lina glanced at him nervously. "Did I do something wrong?" Morales shook his head immediately. "No, young lady. You survived. That's what you did." Her breath trembled. She looked down quickly, embarrassed by the tears that sprang up again. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she whispered. The agent blinked as if startled she'd even ask. "Because children deserve safety," he said simply. "Every one of you." Lina sat frozen, as though her brain couldn't accept a world where that sentence could be true. A few minutes later, there was another knock. The door opened, and Patricia, the judge's clerk, stepped in with a large manila envelope. "Lina, honey," she said with a gentle smile. "This is for you." Lina accepted it carefully. When she opened the flap, her eyes widened. Inside was the money collected from the courtroom, organized into neat stacks, each one folded and counted. "I can't take this," she said immediately, shaking her head. I didn't do anything to deserve." "Yes, you did," Patricia said. "You told the truth." But not another word. Patricia reached out, squeezing Lina's trembling hand. "Those people donated because they saw a child trying to survive. You didn't ask for it. You didn't manipulate anyone. You simply finally let people help you." Lina's throat tightened. Voice breaking, she whispered, "Thank you." Patricia kissed the top of her head and left the room. Minutes later, Agent Thompson received a text and stood. "They're ready for us. The safe residence has been secured and your grandmother is being transported there now." Lina's body stiffened. "I want to see Grandma. And Nico. Turku need to see them." "You will," Thompson said. "We're bringing you to them directly." Before they could leave, another familiar voice filled the doorway. "Lina?" It was Judge Caprio. She stood instinctively. He approached her slowly, careful not to overwhelm her. "I wanted to speak with you before you go," he said warmly. "May I?" She nodded. He sat across from her, hands folded. "I need you to know something," he said. "What you shared today, it will help more than just you. It will help Nico. It will help your grandmother. And it may even help other families going through something similar." Tears welled again. "You are not defined by the violence you survived," he continued. "You are defined by the courage you showed in protecting your brother and in coming here today." His voice trembled slightly. It was subtle, but Lina heard it. "From this moment on," the judge said softly, "your life is taking a new direction. A safer one. A healthier one." She swallowed hard. "What if I'm not brave enough?" "Oh, Lina." He shook his head gently. "You've already been brave. What comes next is healing." He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a small folded card. "This is my clerk's direct line," he said. "If you ever need help navigating the system, advice, or just someone to advocate for you, call. Someone will answer." Lina's hand shook as she accepted it. "Why? Why are you helping me so much?" The judge exhaled, nostrils flaring slightly, as though holding back his own emotion. "Because every child deserves a chance," he said. "I've seen too many who never received one." Her eyes shimmered. "And you, young lady," he added, "deserve so much more than the life you've had." Without warning, Lina stepped toward him and wrapped her arms around him. It was tentative at first, as if she expected to be pushed away, but Judge Caprio returned the embrace gently, his hand steady on her back. Agent Thompson and Morales respectfully looked away, giving them a private moment. After a few seconds, Lina pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I'm ready," she whispered. The agents nodded and guided her toward a side exit for security reasons. But just as they reached the door, a radio crackled from Officer Rivera standing near the hallway. "Unit 12 to base, we have visual confirmation on the suspect." "Repeat visual confirmation. Morales residence." Lina froze mid-step. Agent Morales reacted instantly, stepping closer to shield her. "Stay behind me," Rivera continued. He attempted to approach the residence. "Officers are in pursuit." Thompson squeezed Lina's hand. "They've got him. He's not coming near you." But Lina wasn't breathing. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic. "Isis, Grandma's safe?" she whispered. "Absolutely," Thompson said calmly. "I promise you." Her breathing slowly returned. The radio crackled again. "Suspect detained. Repeat, suspect detained." Lina's knees nearly buckled. If not for Thompson's steady hand, she might have collapsed. He's really gone, she breathed. He's in custody, Morales confirmed. He can't hurt you anymore. Her face crumpled, not in terror this time, but in overwhelming relief. Years of tension loosened. Years of fear exhaled. And for the first time in her life, Lina whispered, "I'm free." They walked her out past a side stairwell, down a quieter hall, and toward the exit where a secure vehicle waited. For once, Lina did not look behind her. She didn't scan the corners. She didn't brace herself for danger. She stepped outside to the sunlight. New world, a new chapter, a new life. And for the first time since she was a child, the air didn't feel like something she needed to fear. The sun outside the courthouse felt warmer than it should have for a day filled with so much fear. It washed over Lina's face as she stepped onto the sidewalk, flanked by Agents Thompson and Morales. She blinked at the sudden brightness, almost startled by how different the world felt, how it looked, less like something she needed to tiptoe through, and more like something she might, someday, inhabit without trembling. A black, unmarked SUV waited at the curb, engine running. Agent Morales opened the back door for her, but before Lina climbed in, she paused, glancing back through the glass doors of the courthouse. Judge Caprio stood just inside, hands clasped behind his back, watching her. Not guarding, not judging, just watching, ensuring, promising. She offered a small, fragile note of goodbye shaped from gratitude deeper than words could hold. The judge smiled faintly and nodded back. Only then did she slip into the SUV. The ride was quiet at first. The city moved past the windows in soft blurs brick buildings, cracked sidewalks, corner stores, rows of narrow homes with leaning porches, and hand-me-down bicycles chained to railings. These were streets she'd walked all her life, always in a hurry, always checking over her shoulder. Now she looked at them differently, like someone seeing her hometown for the first time, without fear shadowing every step. Agent Thompson broke the silence gently. "Lina, have you ever stayed somewhere outside your neighborhood, even for a night?" Lina shook her head. "Grandma doesn't like leaving the apartment much. She says she sleeps better when she knows exactly where Nico is." "Well," Thompson said with a kind smile, "tonight you'll sleep somewhere safer than you've ever been." Lina swallowed. "It feels strange." "What does?" "Safety," Lina whispered. The agent's smile faded into something softer. "That's normal, but you'll get used to it." Lina wasn't sure she believed that, not yet. But she wanted to. As they drove, Morales relayed updates through his radio. Suspect secured, booking commenced, grandmother relocated and stable, pediatric transport en route with minor. Every sentence acted like a thread loosening knots inside Lina's chest. But the biggest knot wouldn't come undone, not until she saw her family. When they finally pulled into the driveway of the safe residence, a small 2-story house with shutters, painted a gentle blue, and a small wooden ramp leading to the porch, Lina hesitated. It didn't look like a shelter. It didn't look like the cold, blank rooms she had imagined when she heard the phrase safe house. It looked normal, cozy, like a place someone might bake cookies in, like a place with soft rugs and gentle lamps, like a place where people weren't afraid to sleep. The front door opened before she could move, and her grandmother, Rosa Morales, rushed out. Tears streaked her wrinkled cheeks as she reached the bottom of the ramp, trembling with urgency. "Lina," she cried. Lina didn't walk, she ran. She collided into her grandmother's arms with a force fueled by weeks of fear, years of secrets, and 15 minutes of believing she might never see her again. "Grandma," she sobbed. "I'm sorry. I should have told you." "No, no, my girl," Rosa whispered fiercely, cupping Lina's face. "You did everything right. Everything." Lina cried harder, collapsing into her grandmother's embrace. Thompson wiped a tear from her own cheek before looking away to give them privacy. A moment later, a familiar small voice called from the doorway. "Lina?" She froze, breath caught in her chest. Nico stood there, in hospital pajamas, hair tousled, an IV bandage still taped to his arm, but smiling. A tiny, relieved, exhausted smile. "Nico," Lina breathed. He ran to her, arms wrapping around her waist. She dropped to her knees and held him tight, burying her face in his shoulder. "I was scared," he whispered. "But they said you were coming. They said you were safe." "I'm here," Lina murmured into his hair. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in months, maybe years, the three of them, Lina, Rosa, and Nico, stood together, without the shadow of a man towering behind them. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon and warm bread. A social worker, in her 30s, Ims. Delgado greeted them with a calm, reassuring tone. "You're welcome to explore," she said. "This is your space now." She led them upstairs. Nico's room had dinosaur sheets, stuffed animals stacked neatly on a shelf, and a small desk with crayons already waiting. He ran in immediately, eyes wide in disbelief. "Is all this for me?" "Yes, sweetheart," Delgado said. "All of it." Nico picked up a plush stegosaurus and pressed it to his face. Lina's room was next light blue comforter, a small desk with a brand new notebook and a lamp shaped like a moon. She stared at it as though afraid touching anything might make it disappear. "This is mine," she whispered. "Yes," Delgado said. "Everything in here belongs to you." Lina touched the soft blanket, fingers sinking into the plush fabric. The sensation pulled a small, unexpected sob from her lips. "It's okay," Delgado said, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "You're allowed to feel this." Grandma Rosa's room had a nightstand with her favorite peppermint foot cream and a brand new reading lamp. Rosa smiled with exhaustion and gratitude. Agents Thompson and Morales gave them time to settle before gathering everyone in the living room. "Here's what will happen next," Thompson said softly. "You'll stay here tonight with on-site security. Tomorrow you'll meet with your assigned caseworker and attorney. They'll help you prepare for the long-term plan: medical, legal, financial, emotional." Morales added, "Your father will be held until his arraignment. You will not have to see him." Lina nodded, though the word father still seemed to sting every time someone said it. After explaining procedures and exchanging contact information, the agents stood to leave. Thompson bent down to look Lina in the eyes. "If you need anything, anything at all, you call us, day or night." Lina nodded again, clutching the business card Thompson offered. Morales gave her a respectful nod. "You're a tough kid, Lina. Tougher than you know." When they were gone, the house grew quiet. Rosa kissed her forehead. "Mi niña, you saved us. You really saved us." But Lina shook her head. "I just told the truth." "Sometimes," Rosa whispered, "that is the bravest thing a person can do." Nico climbed onto the couch beside her, curling into the crook of her arm. The weight of him, warm, safe, alive, made her close her eyes. Later that night, after Rosa fell asleep in her new room and Nico drifted off clutching his dinosaur, Lina sat on the windowsill of her room, staring at the streetlight glowing softly outside. She heard someone approach. Judge Caprio's clerk, Patricia, appeared in the doorway, holding a wrapped box. "I thought you might like this," Patricia said, handing it to her. Inside was a journal hardcover, dark blue, with gold-embossed lettering that read, "For New Beginnings." Lina touched the cover gently. "I've never had one," she said. "A beginning?" Patricia asked. "A journal." Patricia smiled warmly. "Now you do." She started to leave, but paused. "The judge asked me to tell you something. He said, 'Tell Lina her courage will echo farther than she knows.'" Lina swallowed hard, hugging the journal to her chest. The house was safe. Her brother was safe. Her grandmother was safe. For the first time in her life, Lina let herself imagine a future. Maybe school without fear. Maybe college someday. Maybe a job helping kids like her. Maybe waking up in a world where footsteps outside her door meant breakfast, not danger. She returned to her bed and slipped beneath the soft blanket, letting the warmth sink into her bones. Before closing her eyes, she whispered into the dark, "I'm going to be okay." And as she drifted to sleep, for the first time in years, she believed it. In every corner of the world, there are children like Lina children who carry the weight of secrets too heavy for their shoulders. But this story reminds us that sometimes a single moment of truth can open doors that once felt sealed shut. Justice isn't just about punishment. It is about protection, compassion, and the courage to intervene when someone cannot save themselves. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. What part moved you the most? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another reminder of how powerful humanity can be when we choose to help rather than turn away.